And welcome to the weekend edition of The Public Square. I'm Wayne Shepherd here with Dave Zanotti and crew. Mr. Zanotti, what's it going to take to put you into a new gas stove for the kitchen this week?
Well, I got another question for you. How do those wonderful chefs in downtown Chicago at all those beautiful restaurants like cooking on gas stoves versus electric stoves?
Well, I don't know. They have their electric cars in the parking lot. Maybe they'd be okay with it. I don't know.
So, you know what? I haven't asked this question before. Who in their home here around the table cooks with gas versus cooking with electric? Anybody got an electric stove?
You got to go gas.
I've got electric. We want gas. We can't get it out to where we live, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rob?
Gas.
Gas.
Columbia Gas, son of Columbia Gas man, where he worked for 40 some odd years. Yeah.
We should have had Bub in on this show. It would have made the whole difference. Maybe we'll actually get him to listen to one the whole way through now that we're talking about gas stoves. All right.
Oh, he listens weekly. Trust me.
I'm a master griller.
All right.
So there you go.
And you're using propane. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, George Harvell would question that master commentary if he wasn't using real wood.
Right.
In my home. Well, I cook with wood, too.
All right.
We've got a fireplace. But
is it hickory?
No.
Okay.
Sorry,
All right.
George.
All right. That's Executive Chef George Harvell,
Yes.
who I can assure you has always cooked on gas if he isn't cooking on wood.
He is the man. There's no
pit.
question about it. Well, I'm glad we got that all sorted out. Electric here in Chicago, by the way, at the Shepherd home. So it's just my wife's preference. So that's the only
Okay.
reason.
So the challenge is, you said preference.
Yeah.
And right now we have choice.
Right.
But if the federal government has its way, those choices will be eliminated for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because the federal government has decided that as a part of their current crusade, the administrative state, the Department of Energy, and other departments in the administrative state don't want us cooking on gas or with fossil fuel products. It's electric. That's the end of the conversation. Now, Jeff, I can already said,
where does electricity come from? Jeff?
Okay, I've been told.
Wayne got it before you did. Where does the electricity come from?
Okay, yeah. Where's electricity coming? I've been told my entire life.
It comes from the sky.
Yes, right. I've been told my entire life that natural gas is the cleanest, most efficient form. Plentiful form of energy for heating your house, for cooking, for hot water. And I've been told this my entire life. Now, it's not clean. Now
it's bad.
It is somehow a gas stove is going to blow up on me.
No,
or
it's
something?
bad. It's just bad, Jeff.
It's just sinful now.
Because it's just bad because the federal government, under the control of the current administration, the administrative state, has a full-on, transparent. This isn't even political. This is reality. Fossil fuels are the enemy, and any vestige of fossil fuels that can be eliminated have to be eliminated. Now, how that all connects in the big picture of real science and real physics, it's like, don't bother me with the details. I'm on a crusade. And just like the whole question of incandescent light bulbs, I don't think most people know that you now cannot sell or distribute incandescent light bulbs.
Legally.
Yeah.
Legally. Right.
Yeah. Marijuana you can,
right.
but not incandescent light bulbs. Just want to make that point.
That's a different kind of lighting up, Jeff. But
It's a different subject altogether.
Yeah.
All right. But there we are with this stuff is very, very serious. Now, there's a story that's come out recently that we had to cover because it does deal with this question of gas stoves, but it also shows you how the administrative state actually works. And in a minute, we're going to hear a clip from Ohio Congressman Bill Johnson, who actually is from Southeast Ohio, and his district covers a lot of the people that Bub Walgate's been calling on over the years for Columbia Gas and other places, and gas and coal and energy. This is a big deal. When you're talking about the Midwest, particularly talk about Ohio, Eastern Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Now, we're talking about energy capitals. We're talking about unbelievable resources and potential, but they're all on the run now because the federal administration and the administrative state wants these products and these methods of energy eliminated. Now, we could talk forever about climate change. We could talk forever about wind and energy and all that sort of stuff. And look, we could talk for days. But here's the story that I think is going to help people understand this. Now, there's a person working for the federal government who is the Department of Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm. And that's a cabinet level position, has to be approved. by the Senate. And she is in charge. Now, she wanted to get a person hired into her department that would have also required a cabinet level approval, which meant a Senate approval, and they couldn't get him approved. His name is kind of hard to pronounce. Let's see, Jeff, help me.
I looked it up. It's pronounced Marushin.
Mr. Marushin. All right. And he was supposed to get a job in supervising a federal agency called EERE, which is an energy-related part of the Department of Energy.
Now, ironic that it's pronounced Erie.
Yes. All right. It is indeed. All right. One more alphabet soup department of an agency of the administrative state, which has control or seeks control of the American economy, industry, consumer choices by establishing and enforcing regulations. So they couldn't get him confirmed. The Senate didn't want him. Mr. Marushin did not get confirmation by the Senate. And so what did Secretary Granholm did? Hired him anyhow. Just changed the job title, put him in a different spot in the slot, but then made him, in essence, it changed his job description to do exactly what he was going to do, but give him a different title so they got around the Senate.
So you don't need confirmation. I used to do that stuff at home. I got in trouble for it a lot of times, right? When you tried to work the system.
Work the system the best way it works for you. So the agenda in Washington, D.C. is to enforce the administrative state's view on climate change into the consumer markets. And Secretary Granholm and Mr. Marushin, that's what they do. Now, Congress is supposed to have a role to play in this. So let's take a minute and listen to what Bill Johnson recently stated on Fox News, Congressman from Ohio, about this entire question about gas stoves and everything else.
The Biden administration moving ahead full steam to try to switch many of our everyday appliances from gas to electric. From cars and stoves to water heaters and air conditioners, officials claim these new regulations will save consumers money and save the planet from global warming. U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm rolling out a new water heater energy proposal. She claims it would save Americans $11 billion a year on utility bills. Joining us now, Ohio Republican Congressman Bill Johnson. He sits on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. I've always heard, Congressman, that electric energy is the least efficient way, for instance, to heat your household water. Why is the administration so hell-bent on making Americans do it that way?
Well, let's be clear about something, John. This is not about carbon. It's not about climate change. This is about control. This is about more big government. This is about essentially nationalizing our energy sector as well as our home appliance sector and putting it in the hands of unelected bureaucrats who do not have to face the American voters in an election. That's what this is about. If you've been watching, and I know you have, what we're doing on energy and commerce, we've been pushing back hard on the EPA and the Department of Energy on these policies. We introduced and passed H.R. 1, which was a 17-bill package with permitting reforms and beginning to reel in the EPA. We've got another set of bills that will go through our legislative markup next week that's designed to push back on this electrification of our transportation network with electric vehicles. So we're fighting as hard as we can, and we're going to keep fighting on behalf of the American people because they can't afford this.
When it first leaked out a couple of months ago that the administration was thinking about banning gas stoves, they said, "Oh no, that's not what we're trying to do." But in fact, it is what they're trying to do. No chef that I know of, no serious chef, likes cooking on an electric stove. So why not let the consumers decide what they want?
Absolutely, and I agree with you. And let me tell you, in Palo Alto, California, the city council there passed a resolution that basically bans gas stoves for any new or modified construction. But look at what they did. There's a famous chef that has restaurants in Washington, D.C., as well as the west coast of California. And he is a very, very liberal activist. He applies for and gets an exemption only for him because he says he can't cook the kind of quality food that he needs to cook on an electric stove. So the rules are okay for us, average Americans, but it's not good enough for them. They get to live by a different standard. It's not about carbon, it's about control.
Where I used to live, or where I live in New York, we used to get our electricity from the local nuclear power plant, but that's been shut down. And now it's my understanding most of my electric service is generated by burning natural gas. So how is it supposed to be more efficient for me to use, say, an electric stove rather than a propane or a natural gas one?
Well, it's not more efficient. Not only is it not more efficient, but it's more costly to remodify your home to handle electric ranges. I can tell you, I represent eastern and southeastern Ohio, which is very rural here. I don't know very many people in my district that can afford to have their homes rewired to handle electric ranges and electric furnaces. That's not going to work for the people that I represent, John, and you pointed it out. It's not going to work for you either. I'm sure you probably saw the report by PJM, which is the regional transmission operator that provides electricity for people in our region. He says that coal-fired and gas-fired power is coming off of the grid so fast, and what the Biden administration wants to replace it with is non-dispatchable wind and solar, which makes us more dependent on China and cannot provide the base load necessary to heat and cool our homes and to cook our food. It's the wrong way to go. We're going to keep fighting.
We'll see what happens, but a lot of people are going to be upset if they get forced into changing out their water heaters. Congressman Bill Johnson, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, we'll pick up more on this topic in a moment, but that was Congressman Bill Johnson here on The Public Square, and there is more to come. You can always catch us online as well as thepublicsquare.com.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the public square.
We're back with you on the Public Square. Let me set the table today. We've heard from Dave Zanotti, of course. Jeff Sanders is here, Melanie Elsey, Rob Walgate, Alan C. Duncan, and I'm Wayne Shepherd. That's the team. The topic today, at least to begin with, is this energy policy, EERE, ERIE, I think I would pronounce it, Dave.
Carbon control, or is that really the biggest issue? If you take a look at climate change and what the American government today is doing in regards to energy policy and the consequences to all consumers, it is remarkable. It is absolutely remarkable. But the only issue that the administrative state seems to care more about than banning fossil fuels is banning American parents and grandparents from speaking out in support of the defense of children. Now, we've heard about the DOJ's attempts to define parents as terrorists because they spoke out at a school board meeting. Mm-hmm. Right? Now the DOJ is prosecuting and jailing pro-life Americans who are speaking out in defense of innocent unborn children. Now, Wayne, there's a story that's out there I don't think anybody knows about. Rob, we were talking about it. We got 74 and 78-year-old women that are basically being prosecuted, convicted, and are facing sentencing in federal prison because they're speaking out on behalf of human life.
Because they're being charged federally for attempting to prohibit some, and again, that is the words of the prosecutors using. When you look at the facts of the story, the thought that they're trying to put two women in their 70s in prison, it leaves me speechless.
It's mind-boggling.
It is, because I look at it and I'm like, these are the hardened criminals that our Department of Justice is going after in these instances.
To me, it looks like they just want to make an example of them.
Of course.
So if anybody else is thinking about praying outside of an abortion clinic or counseling people on the sidewalk or standing there and holding up a sign, you're going to think twice now.
So were these women blocking the entrance? Were they
were
punching anyone?
Protesting at an abortion facility in Washington, D.C.
And Melanie, the FACE Act is what it's called. What's that stand for?
Right. The FACE Act is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. And it is a measure of the Justice Department to make a decision to go after these people on those federal charges. So they were peacefully protesting.
Those women, if you've seen the pictures of them, they couldn't do otherwise. Yeah. They couldn't peacefully. They can't block anybody.
They weren't throwing anything on anyone.
These are 70-plus women. So this FACE Act is trying to scare pro-life advocates is what it's trying to do.
The DOJ in a release said that the defendants were involved in a conspiracy to blockade the abortion clinic.
So did they actually blockade it?
According to the prosecution,
I don't think it's physically possible for a 73-year-old to blockade.
Just playing
anything.
devil's advocate here, you know.
Yeah. So now, first off, let's go back for just a second in history. This brings back some creepy memories that we've all witnessed in the pro-life battle years ago. Remember people like Randy Alcorn and Joe Scheidler and others?
They're bringing RICO charges against those
guys. They were claiming them of being conspiratorial and attempting to shut down the business operations of Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers. And so they went through terrible prosecutions and lost, I don't know, heaven knows how many millions of dollars.
Right? I've watched in the past couple months climate protesters block highways, people going to work, sit down, they won't
destroy
move,
famous works of art on public property.
Works of art. And then when law enforcement shows up, and this isn't to knock law enforcement, I understand their hands are tied in a lot of situations. But when law enforcement shows up, then the negotiations start to try and get those people to move. And you have miles and miles of traffic backed up where no one, in many instances, people get out of their car, scream at them, rip the signs out, and it causes confrontation. And I'm like, these two women could not have blockaded anyone from anything when you look at their condition, and they're being charged so that they may go to prison for years and years.
Let's think about this. The Department of Justice, that's Merrick Garland, and then involved the FBI in this process as well. They went after these women. They dragged them into court. They dragged them into jail. And they have prosecuted and convicted these women. They face 11 years in prison.
Wow.
Over $300,000 in federal penalties. And they're awaiting sentencing right now.
Has the federal government gone after the Antifa protesters who destroyed property, who beat people to a pulp?
Which is an ironic question, Jeff, because to quote from a portion of the FACE Act, it's to prohibit threats of force, obstruction, and property damage intended to interfere with the reproductive health services. So threats of force, property damage.
That's the
Antifa's
MO. That's
motif.
Every day, right?
So we've got the Department of Justice utilizing the federal criminal prosecution system, federal courts, federal enforcement, FBI, and federal jail times for senior citizens who are expressing First Amendment rights in regards to the country that they live in and the protection of innocent unborn life. And nobody is talking about this.
And also, if you look at the flip side of it, and again, we're not advocating for violence or anything of that nature, but when you think of the flip side, since the Dobbs leak or since the Dobbs decision came out, look at the number of attacks that have taken place at Catholic churches, crisis pregnancy centers. I mean, look
Supreme Court Justice Holmes threats.
There you go.
Home.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And exactly. And where's the prosecution? Wait a second. What about the homes of the Supreme Court justices?
Well, and think about as well, when wasn't it the confirmation hearings for Justice Kavanaugh that the pro-abortion folks showed up and basically overtook the building, overtook the Senate building.
And they were clawing at the doors. Remember that video? They were clawing and screeching and caterwauling at the doors to get into the hearings.
Yeah, of the Supreme Court building.
Were any of them prosecuted by the federal government?
So this is not a small issue. Now, we have lived in a country believing that when we get into the system of the federal courts, that the standards and the principles of the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights are non-negotiable, and that our Justice Department is built upon those principles, that prosecution and enforcement in that regard, for years, the FBI was not out in the streets arresting people. This wasn't the role of the FBI. The local law enforcement was basically things have changed so dramatically. We talk about the politicization of the federal Justice Department. I don't know if that there's a better case than look at the pictures of these two senior citizens and say they have been jailed, tried, convicted, and are awaiting sentencing with the potential of facing 11 years in jail.
That was the creepiest line in the article that I saw. They are awaiting their sentencing.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have a speedy trial, right, in this country. And so who knows how long they're going to leave these people to wait for their sentencing.
Well, and remember when we had Pastor Pileski on
Yes.
the terrible strain that he's been fighting in regards to the Canadian civil government? We've said, thank God this is America, not Canada.
Well, here we are.
Wait a minute.
You sure we're still in America?
Yeah, or what has happened to America?
Not the one I used to know.
I mean, again, you say, well, is it time to go to break? No, I think we could sit on this moment for a day and not couldn't turn the volume up high enough to try to explain to people. You've got people who are expressing their First Amendment rights. They disagree with the public policy in the community that they were working in and living in, and they went to express their opinion. And there is a federal law that says there is a no free speech zone here. There is a no religious liberty zone here. There is a place that you can't go to because this is a protected entity from speech, a protected entity from assembly, a protected entity from petition. You can't be an American here because this is a place you're not permitted to go. Now, I could understand if we're talking about Fort Knox or a nuclear facility or Area 51 or the trade secrets of the United States of America. This is a clinic in these are public lands. Okay, I mean they're walking across sidewalks that aren't owned by the clinic.
Right, I think that's
they're
very
parking
important.
on streets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any other businesses that get that type of kid glove protection?
Long pause.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking no.
In fact, just the opposite. There have been crisis pregnancy centers and even Catholic churches that have been vandalized, threats, damage is done, violence against these entities, and they don't have the same treatment.
This is so clearly wrong. Why hasn't there been more of an outcry, do you think? Are we that apathetic?
Wayne,
or silenced into submission?
Honestly, that's what frightens me. When you add up the Justice Department's work against parents speaking out in school boards, and you add these kinds of activities against pro-life Americans, you really begin to feel like the government is now an administrative state that is picking winners and losers, and you don't have rights unless you agree with the agenda. Now, there's another story that has a little different ending so far that we want to cover in just a minute, and that's the story of Mark Houck in Pennsylvania. We've talked before about Mr. Houck's pilgrimage through this process on the public square. But we're going to hear from him in a video that the Daily Signal produced that I think we're going to excerpt. And there's some significant portions in this video that explain what happened to him and how he endured and all the litigation that he went through to finally be able to be released, but not before the FBI came to his home in the dark of the early hours of the morning. Bunches of them, guns basically out, drawn, banging on the door, terrifying this man and his children, and hauling him off to jail because of an incident that happened at a local abortion clinic in a situation where Mr. Houck was not prosecuted by any other level of the government, but the FBI decided to come in and prosecute him. Now, you got to hear this story when we get back.
Yeah, well, you've heard some terrifying examples here today of government overreach, and there's more to be told, and you've heard what's ahead. I would be frustrated if I had to leave at this point, but maybe circumstances prevent you from listening to the rest of this program on radio. You can always catch it online, so tune in to the rest at thepublicsquare.com or use the smartphone app, The Public Square.
spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the public square.
Back with you in the public square. You heard Dave Zanotti set up this video now we're going to hear on radio from the Daily Signal, the story of Mark Houck.
On October 13th, 2021, Mark and I arrived at noon. We began our rosary and had no incident till about 12:45.
He walked over and my dad, as he's walking there, is telling him to go back, like, leave us alone. He doesn't listen, and he leans up against the wall, like, about a foot from me and said, your dad's a bad person, your dad's hurting women.
At this point, it was Dad. It was just being Dad. Dad steps in and says, leave us alone, go back. The next thing I know, he's talking to my son again. So I turn, and I just have a reaction, I push him. And that was it. That was the incident. He did fall to the ground. I did not intend for him to fall. I just was intending for him to get away from my son. The Philadelphia Police Department didn't want to do anything with it. The DA didn't want to do anything with it. Civil Affairs weren't doing anything with it. He had to file a private criminal complaint in Philadelphia Municipal Court, so it's at the state level. Preliminary hearing comes, case is dismissed. 5 days later, on April 27th, I get a target letter from the Department of Justice, Eastern District of Philadelphia. Have your attorneys contact us. You're a target of a federal grand jury investigation. My attorney contacts the Assistant U.S. Attorney and says, you have no case. My client is innocent, and there's case law in your district against this. But should you want to indict him, no need to bring an agent out to his house. We'll come down peacefully. I'm up on Friday, September 23rd at 6:30 in the morning. I'm down here and there's a bang on my door, really loud, and the doorbell's rung like 30 times or something. It just keeps ringing, ringing, ringing. And they said, it's the FBI, bang, 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 again. I said, okay, stay calm. I have 7 babies in here. Please, stay calm. There was 15 marked and unmarked units in my property.
And as soon as I start coming down the stairs, then a gun is pointed at me.
I see everything that's happening downstairs. I don't go downstairs, but I just start crying. Also, when I see all my siblings crying.
And so we get to the federal building. Now I'm cuffed in my hands. They fingerprint me. They shackled me in my waist, and then they shackled my ankles tightly. And I have bare ankles because they wouldn't let me put socks on. And then I'm chained to a table in a really small room. I felt at peace. I had tremendous peace. I was at the foot of Calvary. I was there with Jesus, and I prayed without ceasing for 6 hours. They brought me down to the U.S. Marshals, and I was treated like a dog there. I was treated like a felon, a convicted criminal. The language and the tone was just that's who you are. By the time I was done, it was about 8 or 10 hours later, and I was reunited with my family. We embraced and of course, began the journey towards the trial. And so United States versus Houck was really just not something we would wish for, but we recognized that we were called to, that God had created us for such a time as this. The night before the trial, we were in all-night adoration. The whole thing was coded in prayer. My attorneys were coded in prayer. The judge was coded in prayer. The prosecution was coded in prayer. Everything was about prayer and was about grace. The only time I got nervous was the last 2 minutes before the jury came out. And the best words of the day were, Mr. Houck, you are free to go. And that really broke me because I didn't feel like my life was my own. And even though I was inwardly free, of whatever they would do to me. I knew that I was truly free in every sense of the word. Children are the true victims in all this. After the arrest, they were traumatized, and they're still traumatized till this day. This was not necessary. Someone could have been shot that day. If my little ones grabbed one of our airsoft guns, they would have been shot. I could have been shot. It was an act of pure terror on the part of the government. Intimidate me and instill fear in my family and me and in the pro-life America. We're going to pursue justice so that others don't have what happened to us happen to them. So that this never happens again in our country. Our founding fathers would not have wanted this to happen. This is not what we set up our republic to be.
It's the FBI. They knew exactly what they were doing. That's what I want people to know, is just that this really happened in America.
So Wayne, here's the thing. This video kind of ends with sort of an upbeat, happy ending because the federal charges against Mr. Houck were dropped by a jury. And so he went through the process, and the jury said, no way.
But how did it get that far? How did it get that far?
Thank you.
Well, it didn't get that far because the local authorities felt it needed to get that far. It didn't get that far because the state authorities felt it needed to get that far. But the Department of Justice stepped in.
And again, it's an intimidation move.
Yep. Yes.
It's, hey, look what we can do to you. So we need to just prove that this type of intimidation is not going to scare us. It's not going to stop us from speaking the truth in love.
But it did work, because think of all the money that Mr. Houck had to spend on an attorney, and all the time he was in jail, which was 10 hours that day, but still the threats to his family.
Mm-hmm. His kids will remember that forever.
Even the way he was arrested.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they pointed guns at his wife and his kids. But even though he was acquitted, how many millions of Americans are looking at that right now and saying, you know what, I don't want to go through that.
I don't need that headache in my life.
Yeah, I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So it did work.
I wish we could take a moment right now and poll all the thousands of people that are listening to this broadcast and just ask everybody at the same time. And I wish they had a way of getting the results. Let's just go back to any period of time in your life. And if I had said to you, this is what America's going to look like in 2023, that the Federal Department of Justice, working through the FBI, is going to be banging down people's doors in the early mornings and intimidating their wife and children with guns and arrest, because of an incident that happened in an argument in front of an abortion clinic where no one was hurt, nothing was damaged, and no local or state prosecution found any reason for criminal charges to be filed. Yet the federal government took it upon itself to drag this man out in the dark, and if they had had their way, they would have had him in jail.
Because again, this is the one topic, apparently you're not even allowed to argue about it in public. Any other topics you're not allowed to argue about in public?
No, and the thing with this that I look at, and I always try and wrap my head around, is the fact this happened in October of 2021. And they didn't come to his house till the end of September 2022. 11 months went by. And they felt that it was needed to come in and swarm his house with a SWAT team. Like, seriously?
It's also important to note that his
small army.
His lawyer sent a written letter in saying there's no reason to come. If this is going to proceed, he would be more than happy to appear and surrender.
Yeah.
They were fully advised.
He wasn't fleeing the country.
He was
nothing.
11 months later, the local authorities knew this doesn't make sense. State authority, everyone knew except for the DOJ.
But what happened in between then? What happened with the Supreme Court in between then?
Oh, yeah, of course. They
overturned
Roe versus Wade.
And
that's it.
And the perceptions of those in the federal government of we have to now utilize this statute to the fullest extent that we can.
We have to make an example of people. You know, you asked the question, Dave.
Wait a second, Jeff. Can you give me,
sure.
You just basically said this is the politicians inside the Department of Justice responding with law enforcement in their antipathy toward the Supreme Court for overturning Roe versus Wade. That was Melanie Elsey. Glad you're back.
You asked the question, would I have believed this long ago? My answer is yes. In the 1980s, I was very concerned that somehow the Soviet Union would take us over. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that they did in the Soviet Union for decades. And this is the kind of stuff that they would do if they took over here. Well, you know, the Soviet Union collapsed. But I think that the theological, philosophical fountainheads of it just took up residence in Washington, D.C.
You know, and Jeff, I would tell you that years ago, I might have even argued with you about that a bit. And what's really frightening to me is this is just like the Politburo.
Yeah.
If you're at the top of the power curve and you're in the committee, then everything is defined based upon the trends and the decisions of the committee.
Your loyalty to the state.
And if you want to live, you line up with the committee. Whether you get in the committee or not, it doesn't matter because they pick the winners and losers. If you're in the power curve. If you're not, you better get with the curve or you're going to end up in the gulag.
Yep.
There's two kinds of people. those who agree and those who disappear. Now, we're talking about two 70-plus-year-old women, and they're quite likely about to disappear.
Wow. But as the famous saying goes, but wait, there's more, and it's next on The Public Square. Always glad to have you listening to The Public Square. We never take it for granted, and those of you who support the American Policy Roundtable, we certainly don't take that for granted. Your prayers and support mean a lot to us. We're found online at thepublicsquare.com, also aproundtable.org. Okay, we're going to continue on the same theme, but in a different vein this time, Dave.
So let's ask just for a second, let's ask the question, what does God think about all of this?
Oh, boy.
What does the Bible tell us? That what is the right to life, and how are we to treat our neighbors? How are we to love one another as Christ loves us? How are we to love our neighbor as we love ourselves? How does any of this fit with the Judeo-Christian ethic of how our civil government was formed? And you just feel like all you hear is the sound of breaking glass. Suddenly, our government is exempt from first principles. Suddenly, our government is about politics and agenda.
Well, what does that have to do with people getting saved and church growth, really?
Well, Jeff, that's a fair question.
I'm being sarcastic.
No. Because the question's not even sarcastic. You're laying out the pathway to the next question, which is, where are we the people in regarding to having a cause and an ethic to stand up for the rights that God has given us? Why are we witnessing the silence of the lambs? Where are the shepherds? Where are the leaders? Now, we got one shepherd here that leads with us every week. So, all right, we got one. But where are the rest? So let's take a look now, and let's set this up and look at the connected pieces of this. Everything we've talked about right now is predicated upon the Justice Department and the administration and the administrative state, their attitude toward a Supreme Court decision. And the Supreme Court decision returned the question of abortion regulation to the people and to the states. And they surrendered the ground that said there is a federal right or a constitutional right that exists in the Constitution called abortion. They've surrendered that. Now, that means the matter is now returned to the people in the states. Well, in the state of Pennsylvania, obviously, the people don't have a whole lot of right to express their opinion if they're doing it near a place where some other people are expressing their political rights. In other words, the conflict says one side's got to be quiet. So you have special federal protection. But what would happen if at the state level, states began to create a new right we've never seen before? A new right that's never been written down before. A new right that would, in essence, according to the words being used, enshrine abortion. Enshrine abortion, right? Where's the temple? We're going to enshrine abortion into the state constitution. We're in essence going to do what the Supreme Court said could not be done honestly, ethically, and legally with our federal constitution. That's okay. Now we're going to do it in the state constitutions. All right. So now we're going to have a right to abortion. But in the case of the Ohio right, which is now the only one that's on the ballot right now in 2023 and is the single issue that the whole world is looking at. Every state in the union, every media outsource, worldwide, gazing at this particular amendment is going to create a brand new human right. And it's the right to reproductive decisions, including but not limited to 5 different human activities, including abortion. What happens if abortion is now enshrined as a right at the state level? What kind of law enforcement now happens in regards to your civil rights to protest if you disagree?
It'll be what we're seeing at the federal level and the abuse of power. It'll be on steroids. Because when you have a language that says without limits, beyond abortion, It could cover a whole gamut of choices of behaviors that human beings make. And our elected officials in the legislative branch, which are charged with putting guardrails on human behavior, will be powerless to do so.
Well, I'm just thinking of this and the other constitutional rights we are afforded from the U.S. Constitution, or even a state constitution. Are there any of them that have called for the activity of the Department of Justice or local law enforcement for speaking out against those rights?
Let me read for the world some of the language from this Ohio proposed amendment that is now within days of voting beginning. Within days. In an off election year, the single most important ballot issue that has happened in 50 years on this debate is happening in an off election year, a sleepy off election year. Will people even know that it's happening?
With ramifications for the whole country, too.
With ramifications for the entire nation. So let me just read a little bit of this. The state shall not, this is from Section B of the text of the amendment, the state shall not directly or indirectly burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against either an individual's voluntary exercise of this right or, watch this, a person or entity that assists an individual exercising this right. Well, what is the single largest agency, person, or entity that assists an individual in exercising this right, the right of reproductive decisions, including but not limited to abortion?
Let me think about that. Planned Parenthood?
And all the other abortion providers that are out there. Mm-hmm. The abortion industry. So let's say that someone wants to litigate against the pharmaceutical company that's providing the pills in regards to protecting a woman's life because the pills are not effective and they actually have side effects that are dangerous and there's now a reason for actual liability insurance. Well, doesn't the insurance company, and they name Planned Parenthood as the distributor or one of the abortion that distributes the pill, they name them, oh, I'm sorry, you can't sue us. You can't sue us because you cannot bring an action against, the state cannot bring an action directly or indirectly against anyone, prohibit, interference, discriminate, penalize, burden, and the person or entity that assists an individual exercising this right. Now, the other side is running for the hills from this language because they're saying, oh, it's just the state. It's just the state. It's just the state. It doesn't mean individuals. Okay.
That's not what words mean.
Okay. Really? Okay.
Now, don't be picky.
Can you imagine a judge saying, okay, the state can't do it, but all of you can gather together and do it? All right. Now you say, well, maybe they could. Wait a minute. If it's a right, if it's a human right, mm-hmm. You're telling me that the state can't violate somebody's rights, but a human being can violate somebody's rights? Show me where that is in the Constitution, the Declaration, or any of the documents or precedents of our nation.
I was going to say, or case law anywhere. We'll let you go there.
Show me some case law on that one.
How is the state not people? It's composed of individuals. We're not talking about parking lots.
Well, especially when the state is defined as not just being the state,
but the people?
No, it's defined as any government entity in any political subdivision. So those are school districts.
Yeah. Yeah, these are local communities as well. So it's not just the state of Ohio. It's further stretches out to every entity of government. That's a city council. You tell me the city council isn't people?
Yeah, I forget if we've used this illustration before or not in this regard, but it just popped in my head again. And not to trivialize this at all, but we talk about playground fights a lot. Mm-hmm. What it sounds like Planned Parenthood and these type of organizations are doing is trying to write like you tag a kid on the playground, all of a sudden, nope, no, I'm invisible. Or you have to tag me with two hands. Oh, yeah. Oh no, I've got to get out of jail free card. They're making up the rules as they go to protect themselves. That's not even fun to play a game with that kind of person, much less live in a civil society with them.
And Alan, that's a good point because when you say making up the rules as they go, there are laws already on the books that protect the health of women, protects children. On this life issue across the spectrum, those laws are going to be wiped off the books through the courts because all Planned Parenthood has to do, or another entity similar to Planned Parenthood, is to approach the courts and say, look at this, now that law has to be repealed.
Right. When we come back, I have a question, and that is, what if I don't live in Ohio? What can I do about what's happening in Ohio and apply it to where I live? We'll talk about that and more coming up on The Public Square. few moments ago in the public square, we were talking about an upcoming vote, a crucial vote in the state of Ohio. And I think we all understand what's going on there. But for those of us who don't live in Ohio, again, let's lay out why this is important to all of us, regardless of where we live, Dave.
Oh, Wayne, because of what's going on in Illinois.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
In Illinois right now, the state is coming after crisis pregnancy centers, accusing them of misinformation and trying to get criminal prosecution to shut down crisis pregnancy centers. Why? Because Illinois is basically treating abortion as if it is a human right. Their response to Roe versus Wade is to enshrine abortion. Right? So this is what can happen, because what happened to Mr. Houck, what's happened to these senior citizens, this can happen anywhere in any state, and it's going to actually happen more now, not less, because the states are creating. Some of the states are trying to create a mechanism whereby they can entrap anyone who opposes the abortion industry and the language that they're putting in our state constitutions. So what's actually happening in Ohio is a template of what's coming to Florida, New York, Arizona, Nevada. Next year it's coming to a whole bunch of states. And soon it will be coming to every state. In essence, what we're doing is we're replacing the lunacy, the fallacy, the deceit of Roe versus Wade with the same lie. Just now we're switching from the myths of the idea that abortion emanates from the penumbra of the 14th Amendment in the federal Constitution. Now we're saying, forget that. We're going to write it into the state constitution, and we're going to write it so that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry can't be touched.
So what's happening in Ohio is actually doing us a favor around the rest of the country to wake us up.
I pray so, Wayne. I really pray so, because I will tell you right now, God is sovereign, and this debate will never end as long as there's God in heaven looking down upon people demanding justice for innocent unborn children. This debate will never end, but this is a watershed. Francis Schaeffer talked about the watershed back in the 70s and the 80s, and how Roe versus Wade was a watershed for human civilization in Western culture.
So ahead of his time, wasn't he?
Yes, and we're now looking at another watershed. If this goes the wrong direction, the direction it ends up in will be the stuff that we started this show with, those atrocities. They're just the beginning of sorrows.
I always hate asking these questions, putting people in this situation, saying, well, think what would have been said then. But I think about the late 70s, early 80s, when Francis Schaeffer talked about that being a watershed moment. If you would have told him when you go to 2023, Roe would be overturned, but folks would be on their heels and not ready to take the reins and take control.
I spent a little time with Dr. Schaeffer. I think you would have, at that moment, you would have seen him weep. To think that after 50 years of praying and fighting, and he, to his very last breath, to think that the silence of the lambs would take over and people would be so conditioned to not think and not care and not understand.
Well, that's why I think we look at opportunities like we're having in Ohio and opportunities that we're going to have coming up in other states to potentially have a vote on this. We should be excited to live in this time right now, because we actually have a chance to make our voices heard. Prior to Roe falling, we didn't have a chance like we do now in the States. So if you've got something on your ballot, Ohio friends, and if you've got something coming to your ballot in other states that listen to us, this is your chance to vote for such a time as this. This is why you're here. This is why you live. You should be excited to go.
Yeah, Florida, Illinois, everyone, where everyone is listening, please, this is the case study. What's happening right now, you can benefit from in great value. In great value. Michigan, you say, well, we already lost the fight in Michigan. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be over. It doesn't have to be over. There are multiple ways to continue to address this. Yeah. And we must, but the best way to address it is to reject it before they get into your state constitution.
And we can't give up before we get started. California, Vermont, Michigan, they've already changed constitutional language. But we've got Arizona, Florida, New York, Ohio, Missouri, Maryland, South Dakota, and others. Some of those states are in signature collecting stage, but there is an effort in those states to change the state constitution. Other states are changing state statutes. So we've talked before in previous broadcasts about being in the long game. We have to be in the long game, and people need to look at what we have done to the Ohio ballot language and use that as a template in your own state to go after the language, to make people see the language for what it is. Do the same methodology in your state that we are using in Ohio.
You know, I mentioned to someone the other day when we were talking about seethelanguage.com, I said, well, I think you can expect to see the New York language on there next.
Yeah.
I think you'll see it
and
state
the Florida
by
language
state
coming
language.
right in.
Yes.
No, we're not. This is just the beginning. We're not about to stop.
Don't
we're going to
think
take
that you're safe out there.
Right. We're learning right now. We intend to take across the nation everywhere. All of these resources are going to be available. Now, they wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the fact that so many people that are listening to us are praying right now for this country.
Right.
Thank you. We are not in charge here. Right. There is someone much higher than all of us, way above our pay grade, that's looking out, searching to and fro throughout the earth for those whose hearts are wholly dedicated to him. And I will tell you, when we talk like this together, in case you're wondering, we have rooms and chairs in this studio right now that we actually envision you all sitting here with us that are listening. We built this studio like a big living room for the purpose that we want you to know you're here. And oftentimes when we're actually recording, there people are here that are witnessing with us. This is a family affair. And so sometimes look, this debate is beating the living daylights out of us. We have people literally working 16 to 20-hour shifts around the clock. There are days, the days and the hours are slipping through the hourglass. And what we're looking for is more prayer than we've ever had before. In 43 years, I will tell you, we have never had greater spiritual opposition, and the stakes have never been higher. And this is an election where there's no candidates on the ballot. There's no party on the ballot. This is a straight up window of opportunity for people in the Midwest in a key battleground state to say, this is too much, this is too far, this is too extreme. Now, we understand that every state's going to have to come to terms with how the people in that state want to deal with the question of abortion. And not every state is going to see it the same way. Not every provision is going to be identical. But what is critical is that we have consensus in those states. And if people have made the bad decision in a state and you can continue to battle, then you continue to battle. If not, you can move. You don't have to live under that kind of a regime. But here's the thing you got to realize. The goal of the abortion industry is to win these in enough states that they can drag the federal government back into this and they can take us right back under the regime of Roe versus Wade.
And there is one thing that every person across the country can do to have an effect on this watershed moment, and that is take the website seethelanguage.com and post it on your social media pages to have everyone on your social media pages contact everyone they know in Ohio. Because people across the country have friends and relatives that live in Ohio. Keep that message going on social media on seethelanguage.com so that when we start populating that site with what's going on in states next year as they unfold, then that site will already be out there in the world of
we'll be turning it right to Florida. Yeah, we'll be doing the same thing again right for Florida. Look, this fight is on our watch. No one can run away from this. We fought for 50 years. We prayed for 50 years for an opportunity. Now it's here.
Can I give you a passage from the Word of God? It says in Esther 4, verse 13, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Don't be completely silent. And Esther summoned her courage and said, okay, I'm going to do what I have to do. And if I perish, I perish, but I'm going to go do it.
Now, you'll notice this is a call for prayer. This is a call for communication. The best thing that can happen is people talking to people who know people in Ohio. Right now, if everyone listening to this program sat down and said, who do we know from Ohio? You'd be talking about millions of people that could be touched and impacted. seethelanguage.com. It's free. No one's tracking anybody. No one's gathering the information on you. It's there, and you can see the model of what this is all about. You can share this broadcast with people. Now, say, well, wait a minute, I feel like fundraising is about to happen right now. No. If the last thing you can do is give money, that's fine. Money would help. Money would help. And you can go to our website and find out how to do that. It's real simple. Just go to aproundtable.org. But money alone doesn't fix this problem. We need God's help, and we need your help.
Well said. Thank you, Dave, Jeff, Melanie, Rob, Alan. Thank you all for such a important conversation today in the Public Square. Please share this broadcast. You can do that easily by sharing the link to thepublicsquare.com.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.